Welcome to American TESOL Presents Free Friday Webinars. I'm your hostess, Shelly Sanchez-Terrell. I've been here now, it's every other Friday we are here. We're here because of AmericanTESOL.com. And today, usually I come to you from Houston, Texas, but today I am coming to you from Florida, actually Tampa, Florida. So you're able to see me present, and I'm in a remote corner, so a lot of people aren't passing by here. I try to find the quietest place in the airport where nobody really goes, so that way we can have the best sound and the best kind of connection. You can find the recordings at our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/user/ATESOL if you're looking at this on as a recording, and you can find the slides and the bookmarks at shellyterrell.com/TESOL. We do have TESOL certifications where you can travel around the world and you can work in many different places. Just go to AmericanTESOL.com. We have certifications for teaching young learners, teaching business English, and also for teaching with technology. What I want to do is go ahead and just do a general overview of some of the top tips for teaching English language learners. A lot of this is from my experience traveling abroad and teaching language learners and what I think really works. This is also part of a new graduate course that I have online. And so this is some of the research that I've recently found that I think works really well. Even if you're teaching a regular class, like let's say you're teaching history, and then you just have English language learners or English learners is the better term. That's now seems to be the official term in the US. I don't know what the official term is around the world, but some of our international teachers might let us know, in Italy or in Greece, what they term English, is it English learners, English language learners? So you can let us know what is the terminology. One, something that's really important, as Frank Smith points out about language, is the best way to learn any kind of language. And traveling to other countries, learning 13 different languages, not that I'm fully fluent, but I have found that the best way to be able to do this is that it's social. You have to practice. And so this can be very difficult for English, for teachers of English learners, because if you teach in a country where English isn't widely spoken, then a lot of times your students may not have those opportunities. Or your English learners, even if they are in an area, Canada, the UK, Australia, or America, where there are English speakers, they may be in communities where their native language is widely spoken. And so it can be difficult for that reason to motivate learners as well. But when you are teaching English learners, it's important to know that these are the areas they need to kind of practice all at once, not only in your classroom, because sometimes we only have 45 minutes, but it's really important to encourage them to do this on their own time. The more that they practice, then the more they're going to be able to enhance their skills and become fluent. So we often talk about the 4 skills. We talk about speaking, listening, reading, and writing. But also part of that is content knowledge. And that's really important as well, because whatever type of English you're teaching, you want to see what's there. So it's not only enough to assess, when you first meet your English learners, the ones that are learning English, you want to assess, okay, what is their speaking level, their listening level, their reading level, and their writing level. And usually for most districts in the United States, the first thing that they will test is oral proficiency. And sometimes that is the only thing that they will test if there isn't a specific English learner program. So that's depending on whether or not there's an English learner program there. And so then reading and writing isn't always assessed, but I think it's really important that teachers try to assess that. You can find a lot of, and also the content knowledge. You can find a lot of tests, and the great thing about the content knowledge is to really be able to test in their own language if you can, because let's say you're teaching math, for example, and I think Maria, you teach math, but when you teach a certain subject, math, history, if you teach in their language, then you'll really be able, test in their language right away. If you can give them a test in that primary language, then you're able to assess how much math they know, or what is the real reading level, what is their, what is their knowledge of the history, and that might be much higher depending on the type of test you give them. And so it's important they understand how to take the test, and what this, because these are letting you know more about your learners. But there are other ways to get to know your learners as well. It's important to understand their culture, their religion, their interests, their home life, their economic status, their learning needs, any extracurricular activities, their talents, what are their hobbies, and their languages. A lot of times our English learners, so it used to be a popular term, English as a second language. When I first started teaching in Texas, this was a term that was very popular. But what we found is that usually English learners know more than one language. They may know, for example, if they come from Europe, they may know German and French. If they come from, other countries, like let's say they come from Russia, they may know a lot of different Slavic languages. My sister used to teach and live and work in Guatemala, and there was a lot of different tribal languages that her students know as well. So I think that it's really important that we understand that a lot of times our learners may know more than one language. It's important to also know, what's their access to speaking English, or they're able to practice English, to technology. What's their access to having someone to help them with their homework? So access is a really important to know about your students. What was their previous schooling? So one of my sisters, she teaches in New York, and she teaches at a school full of immigrants. And so some of her students in high school, and this is a high school level, they're refugees, and a lot of them have been traveling so much that they don't have any formal school structure. It's very, very little. So when they come to her, they're not used to having scheduled classes. They're not used to hallways and, transitioning and backpacks and books and teachers, and they don't know that form or structure. And so it's really important to understand if your students are going to need acclimation and need some help in that as well. What are their goals? What are their strengths, and what are their personal stories? So those are ways to get to know your learners. How do we get to know our learners? How can we get so much information? Well, of course, you're not going to be able to find this out all in the first couple of weeks that your learners come to you. It's always a process. You actually take some weeks and months to you're continually trying to get to know your learners. And there's some activities that also meet the standards. They meet the core curriculum, the objectives, and they also meet the criteria for working with English learners. And so some of these are surveys, timelines, journaling, and blogging. That is something that I have my students do every single time. I collect their blogs. Well, we do journal writing because we do so much with technology that my students really enjoy writing in a personal journal. They've actually done really well with that. So this past semester, this past year, started having my students write journals instead of doing the blog. And that seemed to help quite well since we use technology. And so with that in mind, I pick that up every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, I pick up their journal, They have free writing prompts, so they can write about what they want. And they also have a list for the week of suggested writing prompts. Some are to do with the culture. I was teaching in San Antonio this past semester. So when we had our Fiesta event, I would ask them questions about that. When they had spring break, I asked them questions about that. And they can choose from the list of prompts, or they can write their own personal responses. My main my main objective is to get to know them, get them constantly practice writing in English every single day, but also so that way I can see their thoughts, what their feelings, and really help them. You can have get to know you activities, which really help them as a class of students to be able to get to know each other, not to be shy. And the more friends they make, the more successful they're going to be. So that's really, really important. Um, where they can, sometimes, and a lot of experts say, home visits, Larry Ferlazzo, which is one of the best people on Twitter to follow for ESL. So I'm going to go ahead and TESOL. Larry Ferlazzo, he has an incredible blog. He makes the best list. But Larry Ferlazzo writes books and often has tons of research and articles about home visits. So if you can take the time and visit the families, then definitely that's really important. Digital storytelling, anytime you have where they're working with, for example, I know in TP you have them use Write Reader a lot. If they use Bunsy, Bunsy's a favorite of mine. These free web tools, Storybird, where they're able to create stories, they're able to share their culture. Then you can learn a lot through digital storytelling, and that meets several objectives. That meets several core curriculum writing and reading objectives as well. So these aren't extra. These can be part of your curriculum, and this is a way to get to know your learners. Peer interviews, where I have my students each semester, they do a project where they interview their families, they interview people from the community, and they also get to interview at least one peer within the classroom. They record this as an audio, and we play this as a podcast. And so you can find a previous webinar on that. It's actually, you can find it at shellyterrell.com. I think shellyterrell.com/audio should be where I talk about StoryCorps and how we do those lessons. You can also find that on my blog. I talk about student interviews. You just at teacherebootcamp.com, you can find that. Just do a search for interviews and you'll find that. Family trees or StoryCorps, and you'll find it, which is a free resource. I share a lot of different free resources. Family trees, that's a very popular way to learn about students, case studies, family interviews. So there's tons and tons of ways you can learn about your students. The best way to be a teacher of English learners is to have already gone through the process of learning a language on your own. When you learn a language, and I learned this when I was learning German, I learned Spanish, when I was trying to learn French, Turkish, all the ones that I was learning, all the languages in all the countries. A little bit of Greek, marhaba. So when you learn a language, it's really, really important that you reflect on the process of how difficult it is for you, what's helped you, and then you start to realize what can help your learners. So for example, you realize how important diagrams are to understanding like grammar structures, how important it is to see visuals, to practice. What works for you really will be a way to be able to help you learn. And the great thing too to help your learners and support them is that when you are able to be familiar with language teaching theories, models, and strategies, and there's so many of them. There's actually tons of them. I cover them. I put some of them on this Wordle because there's so many throughout. There's CLIL, there's computer assisted language learning, we call it CALL. There are different language learnings about the eclectic approach, the silent way, principled eclecticism. There is culturally and linguistically diverse teaching, which you can find shelleyterrell.com/CDT. There's so many different ones that are out there. And these have over time become popular ways to teach a language. There's also a lot of theorists involved with that. When you can find out a lot of different types of strategies. We share them for free on TESOL. We have over hundreds of videos that you can find in our TESOL channel, which is youtube.com. I'll go ahead and put there /user/TESOL. And we made these available because a part of our certifications for teaching English do involve learning all of these strategies, especially if you take the TESOL Advanced course, then that's a requirement. One of the best strategies is culturally diverse teaching, and that's still really important to the way we can structure our curriculum. So within culturally diverse teaching, you have where you acknowledge different cultures, and the way you do that is, let's say that you have a digital storytelling project. So let's say that's how digital storytelling, they're going to practice reading, they're going to practice writing. If the story is read aloud, then they also practice speaking and listening. So you get the 4 skills in that one. Let's say they get to do a digital storytelling project about a memory from their childhood where they were brave. So this is an actual lesson that I have with students. So the students, the lesson description is to create a digital story about a time when you or a sibling or relative was brave. Okay, so there's your lesson. Okay, let's say you use a story book creator such as, let's see, we can have them use Bunsy. I'll just say Bunsy. Bunsy is free. It does, and Peggy's very good about adding the resources in there. Bunsy, you can add audio, you can add visual, you can do so much. So they can practice the 4 skills. So they get the 4 skills because they're reading aloud their story, they're writing their story, they're reading their peers' stories and putting feedback, and they also can listen to those stories. And then because they're talking about their personal or a relative about when they were brave, then they can put in those cultural elements. We can make sure, okay, well, where was this set? Was this set in your own country? Or you can even make it to where, let us know when you were brave, and that can be kind of one of the rubric requirements of grading. You can say this is based on your own country, or maybe you put in the word for brave from your, from the language that you speak. And that's a way to bring in culture. So that's what culturally diverse teaching is. It's when you give these choices and these ways for students to share their culture with each other. And what happens is that all students learn about different types of cultures. The really good thing about this is that you're also able to now distinguish. So sometimes we want to say, for example, I've had students that were from Mexico, and then I had a student from Spain. And sometimes within the public school, the high school that I taught at, they kind of, because they spoke Spanish, they thought, okay, well, they're all the same, people from Spain versus people from Mexico. And people know that that's not true whatsoever. It's a completely different cultures if you've been to both countries and spent time there like I have. So it's really important that you're able to share those stories, so other students will realize, they'll say, oh, just because you speak Spanish doesn't necessarily mean you have the same culture. Your culture can be very, very different. It's student-centered. That means that the student gets to make a lot of choices. The teacher doesn't do as much talking, but the students share quite a bit. And the teacher just makes sure that everyone is respecting each other, they're paying attention, and that they're meeting the objectives. if they struggle with grammar, if they struggle, then you're providing them feedback and you're giving them resources so that way they can make those corrections. You may even correct pronunciation and things like that, but you're more a facilitator. There's a knowledge of learners' culture. So one thing about being a teacher of a culturally diverse teaching is that you're able to learn so many different cultures, and it's really exciting. It's a great way. It makes you feel like it really opens your mind in so many great ways. Having those parent partnerships, that's really important, because the way to success is if parents are reinforcing this type of learning at home. If they're reinforcing, let's speak English together, let's try to learn English together, then your students are going to definitely become more fluent. And there's definitely high expectations. It's not that you say, okay, well, we're just going to do the vocabulary and, it doesn't matter. We're just going to pass you even if you don't know as much. And that can be difficult because that happens a lot when you're teaching English learners, especially if you have other learners that are very proficient or they speak in the native language. Consider the developmental stages. So depending on the age group is really going to depend on the lessons you have. So I created these kind of different charts for my master's TESOL course that Peggy George just shared. And so these are some of the strategies. There's so many of them. So if you missed this webinar, the slides, I'm going kind of fast because they're supposed to be about 30 minutes, these webinars, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. You can always download the slides. If you go to shelleyterrell.com/TESOL, you're going to find the slides and you're going to find these strategies. So it's definitely important. Graphic organizers, playing games, not only games that are online, there's tons of those for English learners, but also in the classroom. Having learning logs, and these are for the different categories. Puppets are great for young learners, maybe not so great for teenagers. But for teenagers, you may have things like them using sentence frames, them using labeling, them using things like role plays or doing jigsaw activities. So there's a lot of different ways that you can teach language learners. Here's some more strategies, things that we call mingling. You can find a lot of those if you go to shelleyterrell.com/icebreakers. I have so many mingling icebreakers, get to know you. So mingling is like if you go to a party and you talk to several different guests. So that's the way you set up your classroom, that you give them these small speaking activities. Maybe they're 2 minutes. Maybe it's a question like, if you were to travel anywhere in the world, where would you go and why? Your students answer this question. They have a conversation with each other in pairs for about 2 minutes. And then you ring a bell or you snap, or then they go to another partner. And then, so we call that mingling. And that's a great way to get them to talk to a whole bunch of different types of peers in the classroom, but it also gets them to practice the same conversation again and again, or the same grammar structure or the same vocabulary. And so that can be very important. And there's all of these great strategies as well. So a lot of these you can see here, this is from Training Teachers in Brazil. You can see me right there. A lot of these, I've done so many different types of warm-up activities and a lot of games, and that's a great way to really get learners to be able to get to know each other, have fun. And exactly, when you make learning a language fun, when you make it engaging, when you make it to where they get to work with their peers, and you don't have to have a lot of technology. Notice that there is no technology in any of these different instances, then it really just makes it very enriching. There are so many classroom games that you can play. And last week we did cover a lot for vocabulary, but you can find thousands of them at this free site, which is ESLJ. And the ESLJ, it's the Internet TESOL Journal, has tons of free resources, not only games, but they do have 132 games that teachers have submitted that they play with their English learners. How do I find out all this information? Well, I have been working with American TESOL for I think almost 7, 8 years already. And with this in mind, it's really important that we connect with each other, with educators online and face to face. So I learned a lot by going to conferences. I met Maria yesterday, which is really great, by going to a face to face function. But a lot of times it's from meeting people, like Antipi, Tiziana, Peggy, that we come and we gather here every single week, other week, or we go to other places. Peggy has a Classroom 20 free webinar every Saturday. And that's how you learn a lot. You get to learn because so many educators around the world share for free some of these great strategies. They show you how they use them in the classroom. And really being connected. When I look on Twitter, and that's really helped me so much. I follow these hashtags and I learn new things every day. I learn about new people every day. Recently I've come to learn about 10 different new podcasts for English teachers. I've been able to learn so many different ways that you can connect. And Roman shared a really good one that we saw last time, which is adlit.org. Yes, that is a really great. They have a lot of audio sites as well, a lot of audio clips, so it's really great for listening. But see, notice how we're all sharing here, and then we learn from each other. We're able to share resources, learn, check it out, and it doesn't take that long, you share a link, you go check it out, and there you go, you decide. That's really great for my learners. I could use it with this lesson, or that's, something that I might want to turn into a lesson. So that's really helpful. The great thing about Twitter is you don't have to join Twitter to follow these hashtags. If you Google the # ELLs or the # EFL or the # TEFL or any of these, you're going to be led to the Twitter page. And you don't have to join Twitter. You'll see all the resources shared. If you join Twitter, it makes it even better. But if you don't have a Twitter account, you can still benefit from the learning of these hashtags or that is shared. And of course, technology is a great way to learn languages. This is one of the best ways. So when I was in Germany, I was taking lessons, and my teacher, she wasn't, so she had to speak in English a lot of the times, and I already knew from my experience being an English language teacher that you have to speak in the native language. In the language that you're learning, you have to have instances to practice and hear it, even though it's very hard. So I decided to take this free German course online, and it was wonderful. It helped me so much. So I would see these videos, I would see these interactions, I would practice, and then I would go with my German neighbors and I would try to practice those conversations on my own, and that helped increase my knowledge of German so much more than in the classroom. So there's a lot of ways that there's Duolingo, there's Busuu, there's so many language learning opportunities that are free that you can even have on your mobile device. And so with technology, and you can find for American TESOL, so you can go to shellyterrell.com, ESL Tech, and that's integrating technology with language learners. But it really is a great way to teach the 4 skills. So like I said, with the previous example where we talked about using Buncee to create a story, then that makes it to where you have 4 skills. You're not just, so if we were to write a story on paper, let's say that the students drew the pictures, let's say they wrote the words, then that would only practice reading and writing. But even if we took a picture of that, we put it on the internet, students made videos, let's say they just put it on YouTube, that gets them and they read it aloud, then that integrates speaking and and listening, because you listen to the stories of each other. So with technology, you're really able to add the 4 skills and integrate that in one whole lesson, which makes it very, very powerful. Plus, our students, sometimes when you introduce them to, let's say, online games that teach vocabulary or dictation, or teach them about listening, audio skills, or dictionary, then your students will find that really fun and they'll practice that outside the classroom. Sorry, there was a plane that just flew by. Sorry about that. And these are the different ways that you can integrate technology. And there's so many ways for language learners, but these are a few. A lot of my English learners, they can listen to podcasts. There's things like 6 seconds. There's 6-second podcasts or 60 seconds of English, 60 seconds of Spanish, 60 seconds of German. I mean, there are podcasts like that. There's ones that focus on business English. There are podcasts. Right now, there's this new site where you get to learn with CNN. It's called, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and share with you, en.news. And it's a wonderful free resource to learn about, and you can listen and see different stories from CNN. So the BBC has tons of podcasts where you listen to the news, and then they have free activities you do with listening to the podcast. So there's so many different ways that your language learners can use technology to really help them with whatever they want to do. If they're into the news and they want to learn English, if they're into stories and want to learn English, if they're into cartoons or soap opera and want to learn, there's a podcast for that, or there's some kind of technology for that. So where do you find all of this information? Well, once again, I said Larry Filazzo. He's a great website. Nick Peachy, one of the best in integrating technology. There's this girl, teacherrebootcamp.com, which is me. Russell Stannard has one of the best teacher tech training, tech training teacher or teacher training videos. He does English language teaching as well. I Learn Technology and Free Tech for Teachers are not English language learner specific, but they have so many different resources for English language learners. For English learners. So it's really, really wonderful. Credentials. So if you decide to teach abroad, this is mostly for abroad, or even within the U.S., you're usually, not all the time, but definitely you need a degree in most of them, or some kind of certification. So abroad, I got my CELTA. I also have my master's in TESOL, but you can get a TESOL certification. You don't necessarily need the master's. So it's really important that whatever school you go to, you check what kind of credentials you need, whether it's a degree, whether it's a CELTA, whether it's a Delta, or the TESOL certification. The CELTA took me, I lived in Greece for a month and a half, and that's how I was able to receive my CELTA. I took it at Athens, Greece, and so it didn't take very long. I believe the Delta takes more like 2 or 3 months. And you have to travel to, you can travel to different places, but that's usually abroad. In the U.S., I took my master's in TESOL, and so that really helped a lot with U.S. You usually need a teaching certification as well. You need a teaching certification in the U.S. for teaching ESL. So check where it is. If you are traveling abroad, make sure you read the contract carefully. Whenever you're going to another country, see if they're going to help you with utilities, see if they're going to help you with an apartment, see if they're going to help you with getting groceries, because all of that is important when you're moving to another country. See if they're going to cover your visa. And then these are all of the things. What are the termination terms? So let's say you go to a country, you think it's really great, but then after 3 months you decide, like a lot of teachers do, it's really difficult to live in another country. Then it's really, really important that you're able to, read your contract, see if you're going to have to pay back the money. The other thing is that a lot of schools in other countries, and I've taught in other countries, don't allow you to freelance. So that's your only salary. If that's the case, so there are places, in Brazil, this was especially important. A lot of the teachers wanted to have, to teach individual learners outside of class. And that was a way that they were able to supplement their income. But some schools did not allow them to. So it's really important to see if you're able to have extra additional students and that not terminate your contract. What are the class sizes? If you go to some places in China and Japan to teach, yes, you make a lot of good money. Sometimes you'll make up to 75,000 to start off, but you'll have 100 students within the class. So it's really important that you look at all of these different types of considerations before you decide to move and dedicate so much time to teaching abroad. There's so much more that I could cover, but I think those are the top tips for now that'll get you started, especially depending whether you teach in the United States